Hello everyone and happy new year everyone. It is 2025 and we are starting it off with a bang, well, if you don't know what happened, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but I will show you a couple of games that were played in the finals of the World Blitz Championship. So in the years before 2024 we had just 18 rounds of Blitz, 9 rounds the first day and 9 rounds the second day, but here we had 13 rounds of the Swiss system, and then we went into knockouts, and Nepomniachtchi eliminated everyone. He defeated first Volodar Murzin in the quarterfinals, and then Wesley So in the semifinals, and Magnus Carlsen defeated Hans Niemann in the quarterfinals. Even though it was a pretty scary match, first game ended in a draw, then Hans beat Magnus, and then Magnus won 2 in a row, eliminating Hans Niemann. Then Magnus went on and defeated young Krzysztof Duda with a straight-up 3-0, and now we have the grand final. Nepomniachtchi versus Magnus Carlsen. If you don't know what happened, you're going to love this story. Let's go through a couple of games. So this is the first game of the Blitz section. Jan had the white pieces, and okay, we're not going to overanalyze it as it's Blitz, but we're going to show a few lines. E4, Magnus went for the Sicilian defense, C5, knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. We have the Ruy Lopez, pawn to g6, the so-called fianchetto variation, against, sorry, not the Ruy Lopez, the Nejmedinov Rosalimo. This is the Sicilian. Sorry, it's already a bit late here. We have castles, bishop to g7, rook to e1, and pawn to e5. So again, nothing new being played here. Bishop captures, d captures, pawn to d3, queen to e7, and now pawn to a4. We have knight to f6, pawn to a5, and castles kingside here. This is, yeah, okay, castles kingside. Oh, sorry. Yeah, castles kingside, perfectly fine. We have bishop to e3, rook to d8, and now queen to c1. And this position has been reached before. Nikita Vityugov had it against Borky Predojevic in last year / this year's Bundesliga, as it goes over December of 2023, and the game ended in a draw. But in that game, bishop to g4 was played, and here we have pawn to c4, and it is now as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. And here Nepo strikes with rook to a3, and it looks like a very tricky maneuver, because after c captures and c captures, the pawn is nicely defended. Knight to h5, and now bishop to g5, attacking the queen. Bishop to f6, we have captures, captures, and now queen to c5. In game 5 of their match, Nepo will try queen to c3, but we're gonna get to that. We have rook to e8, knight b to d2, and now bishop to g4, putting pressure on the knight, pawn to h3, and we have a trade of bishop for knight, captures, captures. You can see that both players playing fairly quickly, 2 minutes on the clock each. Knight to f4, and now king to h2, so you don't run into any weird knight sacrifice like knight captures on h3 followed by queen captures on f3, b6, and this is where the fun starts. A captures, and now, yes, the queen is hanging, but the rook captures on a8. We have b captures on c5, and rook captures on e8 with check, king g7, and now rook to e3, defending the d3 pawn. Queen to d6, putting more pressure on the pawn, and now knight to e1. We have pawn to c4, and now d captures on c4. We have queen to d2, putting pressure on that knight, and now king to g1. We have queen captures on b2, and now rook to c8. And here, just queen to b7, putting pressure on the rook. So it's a fairly equal position, queen versus 2 rooks, but yeah, it's Blitz, a little time on the clock, so anything can happen. Let's see what happened. Rook to d8, we have queen to b4, knight to f3, and now queen captures on c4, creating a passed c-pawn. Rook to d7, Jan will go after that f7 pawn. Queen to c1 with check, we have rook to e1, and now queen to c3. We have rook to e3 attacking the queen, queen to b2, and now knight to g5. And this is a blunder, and the one that Magnus really takes advantage of nicely. He plays queen to c1 with check. We have king to h2, and now queen to f1, going for checkmate. And now Jan will capture on f7, but he will also have to give up the exchange. So he plays rook captures on f7 with check, king to g8, and now if you go to h6, Then rook g3 just defends the knight, and rook captures on h7 will be checkmate. So rook captures on f4, you have to do it to avoid checkmate. Rook to f3, h6, and now knight to e6. And yes, it's still a knight and a rook versus a queen, but it's not possible to hold anymore. g5, we have pawn to e5 and queen to c4. It's not possible objectively, but it is blitz, so anything can happen. We have knight to d8. And now a queen to d5. We have knight to b7, queen captures on e5, and now king to g1. So Jan will, of course, try to hold, but that passed c-pawn is now marching forward. c5, king h2, c4, rook to a3, pawn to f3 with check. We have king to g1, and now queen to b2, going after checkmate. We have rook a8 check, king g7, and now knight comes to c5, queen c1 check, king to h2, and of course queen to f1, threatening checkmate. And now Nepo will try a couple of checks here. Check, 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 check. But it will not be possible, as after king to b8 there are no more useful checks, and now you have to do something about that g2 pawn. So captures was played here. Magnus played queen captures on f2, and he was in this position on move 57 that Jan Nepomniachtchi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So Magnus takes the lead, and this brings us over to game 2, where it's now Magnus with the white pieces. Let me just switch this up real quickly. So it's Magnus with white, and Magnus opened with pawn to e4. And here also its first 15 moves were very well-known theory. It was the Alapin defense, queen captures on d5, d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop to e2, and something that we've seen many times, bishop to e7, knight c3, queen to d6, knight b5, attacks the queen, queen to d8, bishop to f4, and knight to d5, stopping that knight to c7 check, but also putting pressure on the bishop. We have bishop g3, castles, and rook to c1, bishop d7, knight to c3, and we have a trade. Captures, captures, and now there is a game where a6 was played. Here we have a nice a nice queen to a5, and it is now as of move 15 that we have a completely new game. So okay, we have queen to b3 and pawn to b6. We have rook to d1, rook f to d1, and queen to a3, offering a queen trade, queen to b1, and now rook f to d8. We have pawn to h4 and rook a to c8. We have knight to g5 by Magnus, and Nepo eliminates the very strong knight. Captures, captures, knight to e7, and now pawn to c4. Magnus grabs more space in the center. Queen to a5, and now bishop to f4, defending that pawn on g5. Bishop to a4 and rook to d3, as the rook on d1 was attacked. Queen to f5, now pinning that rook, and bishop to e3, as also the bishop is attacked. Bishop to e3, defending on d4. We have bishop to c6, and now rook back to a3, going after the a7 pawn. Bishop to e4, the position is still playable, but Nepo has to trade queens. After bishop to e4, his position is lost, and you would not believe why. Magnus played queen to b2, Nepo played rook to d7, and now do you see the problem, what Nepo missed? Of course you do, because you're an amazing player, and that is pawn to f3. The queen is trapped, because if you move the bishop, then comes bishop to d3, and the queen has nowhere to go. Very, very sad position for Jan. So he played bishop captures on f3. He sacrificed a piece, but now after bishop captures on f3, Magnus is just up a full piece, and there's no playing this. Knight g6, queen to c2, offering a queen trade, knight h4, captures, captures, and now d5. It's merely a matter of a few moves before you resign. Captures, captures, bishop g4, rook d2, and here bishop to e6 with check. Of course, Nepo resigned on move 36. As he's down a piece, the c4 pawn is defended. There's nothing for him to do here. Which brings us to game number 3, that if Magnus draws this one, it's game over, because we have 4 games. If it's 2.5 for Magnus, then that doesn't matter how game 4 ends. So Magnus only needs a draw here, and let's see what happens. Nepo opened with pawn to c4, so he decided to mix it up with the English. e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight to c6, e3, and pawn to d5, the so-called quiet line of the 4 knights. C captures, knight captures, bishop to b5, and knight captures on c3. We have b captures, bishop to d6, and now pawn to d4. We have queen to f6, Castles, castles, and now again there is a game where bishop to d3 was played. Here we have rook to e1, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So okay, let's see what happens here. Pawn to h6, we have pawn to a4. Sorry, is it me or is the camera acting a bit weird? Yeah, maybe just me. So a4, a6, and bishop to d3. Let me just... All right, bishop to d3. We have rook to e8, knight to d2, and bishop to f5. We have bishop captures on f5, queen captures on f5, and now pawn to d5, and look at this now. We have knight to a5, pawn to e4, queen to d7, and knight to f1. Pawn to c6, challenging the center, knight to e3, c captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and queen to e6. We have rook to e3, rook 8 to d8, and now rook to g3. Jan going after Magnus's king, and also there's always this nasty bishop captures on h6 if the queen ever stops defending it. Let me just get rid of this. We have bishop to f8, adding a defender, and now rook to b1. We have pawn to f5 by Magnus. And this was a crucial moment where everyone thought, okay, Magnus only needs a draw. Why is he playing this for a win? But it is objectively the best move, and it's a good, move that Magnus played. So queen to f1. F captures on e4, we have knight to c7, Magnus missed a bit of a fork here, and maybe he thought he has queen to a2 as the rook is undefended, but that's what we said. If the queen moves, the h6 pawn becomes weak. Nepo captured on h6, and now there is a defense here, but it's a really ugly one. You have to play rook e7, you have to allow this, and then after you move the rook, you have to allow bishop captures, and now after rook to a1, because the knight really has no squares, let's say queen back to f7, you'll play queen to e2, and now once the rook captures on c7, you'll play queen captures on e4. And it's a perfectly fine position, you can play it, just all in all, very nice. So after bishop captures on h6, Magnus blundered, and he played queen captures on a4, and now Jan is much better. Knight captures on e8, queen captures on e8, and now pawn to h3. We have pawn to b5. Magnus still does have the passed a pawn, but Nepo will of course play against it. Rook a1 attacks the knight, knight to c4, and Nepo gobbles it up. Rook captures on a6, queen to h5, and rook to g4. So what is rook to g4? Of course, you would love to play queen captures on h6, but let's not forget about our good friend the rook on the 6th rank. So rook to d7, we have queen to e2, queen to f5, bishop to e3, and rook to d3. Now, Magnus fighting with everything he has, but there just isn't enough here. Rook to a8, we have knight captures on e3, f captures, rook captures, and rook to g3. And now rook to c1 check maybe is a bit more resilient, but Magnus, of course, starts advancing the pawn to b4, king to h2, king to h7, queen to e1, and now bishop to e7. And Magnus trying to organize some sort of a defense with bishop to f6, rook to a7, bishop to f6, and now rook to b7, going behind the passed pawn, and you cannot advance it as the rook would hang, and if you play a rook to c4, well, then that's a very sad passive rook. So Magnus goes king h6, rook captures, rook to d3, rook to g4, bishop to g5, and now rook b captures on e4. Very nicely done. G6, we have queen to g3, bishop to f6, and rook to a4. We have bishop to g5, rook g to e4, and now rook to d1, and there really isn't all that much Magnus can do as queen f3 happens. Now he has to trade because the rook on d1 is hanging, and that's pretty much it. A trade happened, and Magnus maybe can try a few more moves to try and hold it, but the rooks are too strong. Nepo just captured on g6, and here he prepared a mating attack after rook to d7 check. Magnus resigned, and Nepo is now, he didn't equalize. Magnus won the first two games, but now it's 2-1, and Nepo gets a chance to equalize. And this brings us to game 4. Now, in game 4, of course, Magnus had white, and Magnus said, all right, so it's a bit of a fluke. I lost one. What are you going to do? I mean, I still have the white pieces on Magnus Carlsen. This is now it. So let's see if this is it. Magnus opened with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e6. Nepo banks everything on the French defense. And now look at this: d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, e5, the classical Steinitz variation of the advanced French. Knight fd7, knight c2, e2, c5, c3, knight c6, a3, and now pawn to a5 and knight to f3. Pawn to a4, bishop d7 a bit more played, but pawn to a4 also very nice. h4, knight to b6, knight f4, knight a5, and rook to b1. Bishop to d7, bishop to d3, h6 castles, and queen to c7. So, if you're a French player or if you play against the French, this is a pretty normal position where pieces are where they should be. A rook to e1, knight b to c4, knight to h5, and now bishop to b5. D captures, queen captures, knight to d4, bishop to d7, and now queen g4, where Nepo castled queenside, and Magnus should play this, but it looks weird. It really looks weird, and after bishop captures on h6, yes, you win another pawn, but it still looks weird. You can't really move the knight because of the queen on g4. You can't move the queen because of the knight on g7, but it was the best move. So here, queen to f4 was played, going after that f7 pawn. Queen e7 defending, b3, a captures, knight captures, rook captures, and bishop to c6. Magnus develops the bishop, prepares to double up rooks on the b file, g5 by Nepo, queen to d4, g captures on h4, opening up the g file, and knight to f6. We have bishop g7, rook e to b1, and bishop captures on f6, e captures on f6, and queen to c7. And now queen to a7. The best move here for Magnus was bishop to f4 right away. It sort of forces e5, and then you play queen to a7, and of course the bishop cannot be captured. If you capture the bishop, then bishop f5 check, and this is resigns. There's no good move here. So after queen to c7, queen to a7 right away by Magnus was played, and now rook h to g8. Nepo now starts the attack and is preparing to play pawn to h3. So Magnus sacrifices the bishop with bishop to f4, but now look at this. Queen captures on f4, rook captures on b7. Magnus now ready to checkmate Nepo's king, but there is one such brilliant move that Magnus did not see it. But can Nepo find it? Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. The move, of course, is rook captures on g2, and this is a very special move regarding the World Blitz Championship, and I'm going to explain very, very soon. We can even do it in slow motion, but it's even the next move that is nicer than rook captures on g2, because if Magnus goes king to f1, then the idea is rook captures, and after queen captures, and king captures, now you just pick up the rook on b7. So, of course, Magnus played king captures on g2, and now not d4 with check. d4 with check, you move the king, and there's no follow-up. The move that you had to see when you sacrificed the rook was knight to e3 check. Now, the king cannot go to f1, and if you capture, then the king again cannot go to f1, and there is nothing here. In fact, it was in this position on move 31 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game and Nepo equalized the match. Because queen captures, of course, is met with d4. This comes with a check, and you blunder your queen. And if you capture with the f-pawn, like we've said, d4 with check, or you can go rook g8 because, okay, it can be blocked with the bishop, but just rook g8 check, and now after king to h1, otherwise you would have king to f1, king to h1, queen f3 check, king h2, and now queen to g2 with checkmate. So they went into sudden death, they went into tie breaks, and this is where something amazing happened. After playing a few games, every game ended in a draw, and then Magnus just made this move, or something like that. I'm very bad at mimicking people, but basically he offered Nepo if he wanted to share the world champion title. So now they went to the arbiters, and the arbiters, well, they made a decision fairly quickly. They said, all right, you guys are now the world champions. So Magnus and Nepo are both world rapid champion, world blitz champions, or they're, each of them is half a world blitz champion, or they're sharing it. I don't know what to call it. I don't think there's a term for that. They've invented it just now, and yeah, it's a very weird situation. But yeah, Nepo and Magnus are world blitz champions. It is as it is. So we'll have to deal with it as that. Magnus remains a world champion, and the Nepo becomes a world champion. So it's also, we could also look at it that way. For them, it will be a great start of the year. I guess they just maybe they were too tired, or maybe they just had to catch a flight or something, but they decided not to play anymore after 3 games of sudden death were played. So yeah, those were the games. Hope you guys enjoyed it. What do you think about this idea of sharing the title? And I don't know if it's definitely against the rules. They just invented it over the board after playing 7 games against each other, which makes it even more epic. But yeah, what do you think about that? And have a great 2025. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank John Anderson, Ben Edwards, William Fuller, Timothy Rosen, and Mark Henley Brennan for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day and an excellent rest of 2025. See you soon.